Thank you for coming back and bringing your homework with you. Just wave your, it's all electronic noise. You have to tell me, just wave your homework. Second day promises to be as full and as interesting as the first day. Franklin's Skirt is up and running, and we're, I think, here in good numbers at 9:20. So I'm going to ask the trainer to take us straight into the first session. As usual, we'll have a short break at 10:30 and lunch at 12:30. Today we'll wrap up with a review session and the presentation of your certificates for the good boys and girls. Welcome to day 2, and we as usual, if there are any matters we can assist you with by way of copying stuff, electronic transfers of data, we'll do that for you. The slides are going to become available.
At a cost?
At a cost. No, the cost of time too. We may do it in one of 2 ways. They're pretty bulky and emailing might be a problem. We could just use your jump drive.
I can give you a solution there.
Yes.
What I usually use for big bulky files like this, it's about, the total is about 13 megabytes. I use the free facility of Mailmatic file, or Usented. That is a facility where they can upload the whole thing onto the internet. You receive a hyperlink per email. You click on the link and you download it directly on your computer.
Yeah.
It's not logging up your email.
Yeah.
That's
Because some people's thumb drives might have viruses. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So that's a better.
Quicker and safer method.
Oh, yeah.
all right. The bottom line is you will get the next year.
The bottom line is that you have to leave your email address with Martin, otherwise you don't get it.
We collected them on the outside.
All right, good. So we'll let you have the next week as we can. Are there any domestic handling? So the trainer will ask for the introduction in just a moment. But we welcome newcomers to day 2, and we are most sincerely sorry that we missed day 1.
Yeah.
We're good to go, Frank.
Yes, sir. For those who are new, we did a round yesterday, which took quite a bit of time, but it was very, very learnsome. I mean, I learned a lot about the diversity of backgrounds of each of you. And the second thing is that it serves as a sort of mini introduction to learn each other. Networking during coffee and break and lunch break is equally important to listen to what I say. Because sometimes the solution is right across the table here, without you knowing what you're working on. So may I maybe invite on that table the newcomers to briefly introduce you, just 1 minute, where you come from, what's your name, and what are the main topics, projects you are working on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Kelly. I'm from Planning Institute of Jamaica. I am the Science and Technology Planner. It sounds like an exotic name. It comes with a lot of work. My main focus is on energy waste management and science and technology policy. What we're trying to do now at the Planning Institute, along with the relevant agencies, is to develop a science and technology culture in the country. So no longer are we willing to accept, for instance, policy made with just gut feeling. We want to move to a more evidence-based policy process where we have, hardcore data that can help us to be, better decisions. And also, we completed, along with the relevant agencies, Vision 2030 Jamaica, which is a long-term national development plan. And a major plank of that plan is to improve our science and technology in the country. So we have a lot of things that we're doing. And this training is really beneficial for this process.
Yeah, most of the background you heard yesterday. So please have a look at the slides, but also the audio recording. You're recording this by video and audio. They'll not be broadcast, but they will be sent to you, so you can actually listen to the audio files again, what we discussed yesterday. You will discover that some of the colleagues are also in policy research here. So, have colleagues. Yes, please. Yeah.
I was here yesterday, but I was not in the room when the introductions were done. I'm Jennifer Ellis. I'm the Vice President for Human Resources at UTech. I'm not a scientist. I am a management specialist. I'm not a big researcher, but right now I'm actually looking at a project on the effect of the use of part-time staff on academic quality and student outcomes. It's turning out to give us some very interesting insights. And when we're comparing the research that we are doing to what most of this research has been done in the United States, because they actually use a lot of part-time faculty in the United States. In fact, they call them Rhodes Scholars, ROAD. So they go what is emerging is that we are developing quite a number of Rhodes Scholars here, and we are not too sure that the impact on student outcomes and academic qualities looking so positive.
But it's interesting you say that. This is one thing we are struggling with in Europe as well. Many countries in Europe are struggling with very fixed and rigid schemes to hire personnel. To increase mobility and to, as I said yesterday, not only innovate research and society, but also innovate education programs, you need fresh blood from outside. The current hiring regimen at many universities are too rigid for that. For example, in France, you can, well, it's changing now, but until very recently, you could not hire a scholar if they have an industry background because they have not enough publications. They can only be hired if they have enough publications, which is actually ridiculous. In America, they're more looking towards your expertise and what you can offer in the education program. So that is slowly changing in Europe, but I recognize that you're struggling with the same issue. And the other thing that was shared, we had in the bus this morning also, how to create a research culture in institutes that have a tradition, mainly in education. There are lots of ideas. I hope we can come back to that discussion in the afternoon. When we have more time for roundtable discussions and sharing ideas.
Just Mrs. Ellis is part of project management here, specifically attached to this work package for training and professional development. She has been a thorough strength with her HR background in the training aspects of this project. And we welcome you to join in the training program as well, Mrs. Ellis. Good to hear you.
Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sasha Campbell, representing the College of Agriculture, Science and Education. I'm the Research and Outreach Coordinator for the Faculty of Science. I was not here yesterday to my colleagues virtual representing the college. A new project that we want to embark on is basically investigating the quality of poetry that's available to us students and that's available on the market. It's a joint initiative between the Faculty of Science and that of Agriculture. So we still have not earned the statistics as yet, so here we go.
Can you say what you can on the product?
Oh, we want to investigate the quality of poetry that's available to us. Poetry is a joint initiative.
Anybody else new on this side? No. We're all there yesterday. Yes. All right. As I said yesterday, I would like to propose that the first presentation is switched. So you will see on your schedule number 6, the finance. I would like to propose to start with the finance here early in the morning while they're still fresh. Finance and budgets are always hardcore issues. And then after the tea break, in the morning coffee break, tackle something about the intellectual property, the exploitation rights, and how to negotiate deals with industry. so that we have covered all those topics before lunch break. And then after lunch break, we have the floor free for your presentations on, I hope, you all did your homework. For those who are new, we had some handouts yesterday. How to structure a proposal, how to build and identify the different building blocks of a proposal, and to convert your conceptual idea into an actual proposal writing. So please ask the ladies on the outside for extra copies of the handouts. You can take them with you. Of course, they're in the presentation, but it's easier to have a piece of paper to work with. We will see the presentations in the afternoon. Also, free roundtable discussion on how to improve your institutional setting, the context, to help your scientists more effectively in achieving projects. So with that, let's go to the finance stuff. It's not a long presentation, but please interrupt me as often as you like, because particularly this presentation about finance and budgets is open for debate. If you have actual cases, questions about is this eligible cost, can I put this in a budget, or how do you calculate this, please interrupt me. I also have a budget sheet here, one or two, in the package, which I will share with you. And we will go briefly through that Excel sheet to demonstrate you how you can build up a budget and change items and model the budget to achieve a balance. Just like yesterday, the presentations are bigger than what I actually present. There are more slides, and I will zip through some of the slides, and I really share those with you as working reference material. So please have a look after this to the actual presentation for those slides that I went past too quickly, because there is much more reference background for you to use. And I would like to invite you, as I said yesterday, to use this material to extract slides and make your own presentation in your own institute for your colleagues. Because that is the purpose of here. Your research managers or coordinators and helping your colleagues to get access to this information. It would not be right if I would be traveling all over the place and training every single scientist in the Caribbean. It's impossible, and it's not right. It's much better that you take that task. So the idea of this workshop is really to help you gain knowledge. As we said yesterday in the proposal, you have 3 chapters. The first chapter about science and technology and what you want to do, the methodology. The second chapter is about management and resources and consortium partners. And the third chapter is about what you want to do with the results, impact. How do you exploit the results? We'll come to that in the next presentation. The second chapter, there are a number of elements. You may remember yesterday, you have an element of describing the expertise of the individual partners, then a chapter describing the whole consortium, how partners interact with each other, and then finally the budget, what kind of resources do you need. The resources in Europe are meant human resources, the intellectual capacity you bring it together in the project, and financial resources. Both are resources. And there can be other resources too. I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, how do you describe your partner resource, your expertise? This is probably the first question that the coordinator will ask you. Can you send me a one-page description of your team? Now, there are several elements there. One is that it has to be very concise, because consortia with many partners take up many pages, and the poor evaluator, as I said yesterday, has to go through all that. So, describe your institute not with the standard text, but adapt the text such that it fits with the purpose of what you are doing as partner in this particular project. Do not list 20,000 literature references. Please, it's not a scientific publication. The evaluators really get bored. What they really want to see is just, are you capable of doing this task in this project? Do you have experience with projects like this? Have you already worked together with other partners in this project? Or are you completely new to the game? So that is what you need to convince. Talk about the experience that you have. And this is an example of my company for one particular project in the past, very small project, so very small, concise text. And the only thing that I explain about the company is that we're an SME, small medium enterprise. We're specialized in this topic, management of resources, with international research projects in the life science, biotech and pharma sector. Because this was a biotech pharma project, I'm not talking about agriculture, I'm not talking about other activities that we do. We will take a lead, this is our responsibility in the consortium, work closely together with the coordinator for communication, and help all partners to agree on procedures and research management and administration. Now we do a lot more than that in our company, but I don't talk about it in the project because it's not relevant. And I do talk about the relationship with the coordinator, so referring back to who bears responsibility. The coordinator bears responsibility, we assist. But we're full partner, we're not a subcontractor or something sort. So we take the risk like that anybody else. Now in another project, this page would look very different. Because if in the other project we actually do research, I would talk about the research projects that we have done, all the projects that we have gained in the past, the research capacity we have, the databases we have. This is not relevant for this particular project. So you see how you demonstrate yourself. In this case, I forgot one sentence, and that is linking to previous projects in which we had a similar role. But usually that is what you do. You give the acronym or a website link to previous projects in which you're involved. And those can be national projects or international projects. It's important to demonstrate your credibility.
Just out of curiosity, what's PPBA? At the end of your name?
Similar to limited.
Limited, okay, that's good.
It's a limited company with private owners. So this is one part. And the second part is to describe the whole consortium. Usually this is the task for the coordinator or the lead partner who writes the whole and delivers the whole proposal. What is important for an evaluator to see in that description is how partners work together. And I should relate back to the work package structure. If partners work together in certain work packages, certain tasks, they need to demonstrate that they know each other, they are familiar with each other, and they will work very closely together. So going back to that work package structure that I said yesterday, for the research work packages, you described partner 1, 2, 5, and 7 are research partners with universities with capacity in research, and they will develop, test, or the product up to this stage. Then they will start collaborating with the industry partner number 8, who will start building a first prototype and test it out with partner 2 for validation, things like that. That is the kind of description they look for in a consortium description. Include partners who are responsible for communication and dissemination, and say that this partner will bear the responsibility for the communication outside. And that can be the coordinator, it can be a specialized partner. Let's go to the actual descriptions of the finance part, the financial resources in your chapter. A few background slides so that you understand the technology, the technical jargon used in Brussels. First of all, for by far most of the programs, we're talking about with the Framework 7 program, we're talking about grants, not loans. Some funding agencies have mixtures of loans and grants, or they distribute only loans and you have to pay them back. If you're talking about loans done in projects of funding, with public funding, you have to demonstrate how your financial plan will look like after the project, how you're going to be able to make money to pay back the loan. Particularly for SMEs, this is very important. For European grants, these are grants, so they're subsidies, they're given. The moment that you perform and have delivered all your reports, the money is yours. Of course, there is a certain level of control. Not all costs are eligible. According to the public procurement, public subsidy grants, there are very strict rules of which costs can be part of these grants and which are not. For example, research grants do not pay for research buildings. You should have your own infrastructure, your own laboratory building. You do not pay for setting up a new building next door. That is capacity building grants, development aid, government grants. There are different sources of money for building a building. But they do pay for the staff, the salary, and for the equipment to perform the research. So please keep that very in mind. There's a distinction. We have two money streams. The money stream from government and capacity building programs to build your building and infrastructure. And these are money streams for performing research in that structure. Of course, there can be an overlap. If you need to do an infrastructure for very specific experiments, you might include a part of that budget into it. For example, in order to install centrifuge, you may need a different power line. Okay, that kind of installation that is eligible, but not to build the next room to put that centrifuge in there. In the level of ICT, there is also more overlap. Infrastructure of buying big servers to maintain this server structure of a whole university is not eligible because that's not research. But buying a server to set up a research database with data, that is a research cost. You see, there is a gray area there, and it's how you justify the cost that determines whether it's eligible or not. We'll come back to this in more detail. First of all, the second thing is that it's not only a grant, but you have to demonstrate that you actually make the expense. So it's not that you plan ahead, and if you get the grant agreement, and you say, well, after the project we will make the expense. No, you have to make the expense within the project period, from the start of the project until the end, not after and not before. That is important because, especially with some flight tickets, for example, for the first meetings, you cannot buy that before the grant is signed. I'll come back to that again. It's a practical thing and really annoying, but the eligible costs have to have a relationship with research activity, obviously, because we are talking about research grants. So not paying your politician, that's not an eligible cost. And there is just one exception for this, and that is lump sums and mobility grants. More and more the research grants in Europe move towards allowing lump sums instead of very, very small itemized things. One example is per diem costs. Instead of saving every single ticket for every coffee that you buy, you have a standard lump sum per diem rate. And it's your expense whether you use that rate or not. It's not the European Commission that tells you how to do this. You make your own decision. You don't have to copy the system of another partner. I'll come back to that again. Especially for so-called ICPC partners, and you're one of those, they're allowed to use lump sums, for example, so that helps you with the bureaucracy. ICPC stands for International Cooperation Partner Project. That's a long Brussels jargon name for any country outside Europe that is allowed to work with European research program. And that means almost any country in the world, except for some rogue states like North Korea and Iraq. But almost any other country is an ICPC partner country. In the list of material that I share with you, there is a table of all the countries that are eligible there. Yesterday we had a discussion about these partners, what with, for example, Curaçao, who has become independent of the Netherlands, but is still within the kingdom. Are they a European partner or a Caribbean partner? Honestly, I don't know now the new status, but there is a table out on the internet. If you look for an ICPC partner on the Cordis, you will find the table, and the Commission uses that table, the most recent version, to make a decision. So that's very nice. And mobility grants also work with lump sums because they have standard salary rates. I'll come back to that later, but that makes life easier for you to work at the level of bureaucracy, but can create other problems. I will give an example later. Another slide on general principles is that it's always a non-profit principle. The grants are there to perform research, but not to make profit. Now, for a university, this may be obvious, but for an SME, this is not so obvious, because they have additional costs to actually write the grant, perform the grant, and report afterwards. And they feel that they might actually lose money. my response to that question is no, this grant enables you to do research that otherwise you would never do alone, because it's too costly. So they bear part of the cost, and you co-fund only half or 1/3 of the cost instead of everything. If it's not important to you to do that research, you're more than willing to co-fund that part, and you're happy to receive the grant as part of the fund to lower the risk. It's not to replace your everyday business. It's to take on new research, to go into unknown territory, develop new products, new processes, and after the project, you're more than welcome to make a lot of money with those new products. That is the idea. So the research grant is not to reimburse your cost only, but it's an investment in the future. Now the same applies to you as an academic institution. It's investing in people, investing in new research projects, investing in new infrastructure in terms of equipment. So that is the reason why there is co-funding. Now I will come back to the co-funding principle. You do not have to pay out of your pocket the rest of the money. As an academic institution, you do get the full cost back. But for industry, they need to co-fund. Then the funding rates, I will have a separate slide. One line here is really important, and that is this one. You cannot make expenditure out of your own private pocket or through another party. They have to be recorded in the accounting system of the institute. If the costs are borne by you, for example, you pay a flight ticket with your credit card, then you have to make a reimbursement note to your university and they have to pay you back. If they don't, it's not in the university accounting system and the university cannot claim it back from the European Commission. That's a basic note. So please, only institution administration record counts. Only that. Keep it in mind because there's always a lot of discussion about it. The other thing is, if you can, open a specific bank account or a specific account for each project, please do so. Some universities are not allowed to do this. By public law, they're not allowed to open extra bank accounts or euro accounts. But if you can, please do it because it makes your administration so much easier. You can track on that one account all expenses, and if you're allowed to open a euro account, you don't even have the risk of currency exchange risk that change. And I've been involved at the Brazilian Institute a number of years ago. They received the money in euros on their account. It was converted on the central account into reais, Brazilian reais. And during the 3-4 year project, the exchange rate changed so much they lost 1/3 of their money. Really painful. And the European Commission responded coldly, it's your problem. So if you can open a euro account, it really can save you a lot of money and risk. But yeah, there are some government structures that do not allow you to. In Mexico and in Argentina, I have found a solution that universities opened a separate private institution right next to it with an agreement that this institution would receive all international grants and help to administer those grants on behalf of the university. That was the only purpose of that institution. And because it was a different legal entity, they were able to open a euro account with the bank. So that's a way to get around the legal restrictions. I have no idea whether you're in similar situations.
No, we use a special account here at UTech.
So you're allowed
to be US dollars, we now have a euro account as well.
Okay. Anybody has a particular problem in this area? Just think of it, because it can make a real difference in the money you receive. And of course, this is not only true for Europe. If you receive a grant from NIH in dollars, you have the same problem. Finally, you don't have, contrary to many other funding agencies, you do not follow the agency rule, you follow your own accounting rules. That means that in a partnership with 10 partners, you may have 10 different ways of accounting. That's fine, because you do not have to give your accounting details to the European Commission, not even to the coordinator. You keep your own books on the spot, you keep all the records on the spot in your place, and only the financial summary, and I will come back to that later, only the summary with the stamp of the auditor is sent to the coordinator and to the funding agency. All the rest remains in your hands. That makes life really easy compared to other funding agencies who require you to justify and send out all invoices and little coffee receipts. So this is the good news. The administration is really, really simple at that level. One other thing, eligible cost is direct cost plus indirect costs. And I will have a couple of slides on this because there's always a lot of confusion about what constitutes indirect costs. So this will come back. First, direct costs are really everything that is directly related to the research activities, including management. So the research-related activity in the lab, but also to manage the project. That is not the administration of the university in general, but the management of the project is directly here, including, of course, travel for that project and any subcontracting. And we'll come back to subcontractors later. Even patent costs, if you want to protect your intellectual property, you have to pay a lawyer. That is, the lawyer is in this case like the subcontractor. If it's an external lawyer, those patent costs, deposition costs, translation costs are all related to the patent, which is related to the research. So those are eligible costs.
Frank, can you explain what you mean by depreciation cost of equipment?
Yes, absolutely. Can I use that sheet for a second? Or we have no marker.
Mine will just come in.
Okay. Well, I'll try to do it this way. Suppose, let's take the centrifuge again. I'm a biologist after all. You have a laboratory, you buy in a 3-year project, you buy a centrifuge in the first month. And the centrifuge is essential equipment, so you describe in the proposal, we need to buy a centrifuge to do these experiments. The centrifuge is 10,000 euro. What you do is in the first year you bring, and the normal rule in your university is, for example, equipment like centrifuges are depreciated over 5 years. That means in year 1 you bring 1/5 of the 10,000 euro. 2,000 euro you report. Second year you use the centrifuge for experiments, you report another 2,000 euro. Third year, maybe half of the year you use the centrifuge, the last half year you don't need it anymore for this project. You bring 1,000 euro. So for 5,000 euro you have put in claims during the 3-year project. The other 5,000 you have to pay yourself. But you can sell the centrifuge the day that you don't need it anymore. It's yours. Or you can charge it on other projects. It doesn't matter, it's yours. As long as you do not double claim and make a profit on the centrifuge, that's fine. On the other hand, if you buy a computer, usually computer equipment is depreciated over 3 years. So if you buy a computer of 3,000 euro, very important one, you can completely claim the full cost into the project, and then for the lifetime of the computer, it's completely covered by the project. And you can use it for anything else. Or sell it. And that is entirely possible. Yes?
I just want to understand, is it that it's all based on a reimbursement basis? I mean,
yes.
So when you send in your financial reports, you receive the money. So you have to upload.
Yes, I'll come back to that in another slide later. You get an advance payment.
Right.
And from that advance payment, of course, you make purchases. The computer of 3,000 euro you have to pay first, and then you get the other tranches in year 2 and 3 and at the end. So yes, you need to make the expense first, and then you are being reimbursed. And the only money which you can use for purchases is the advance money. But I'll have another slide on that, and hopefully that will make it a little bit more clear. For very heavy equipment, sometimes your institute uses longer depreciation rates. I think of hospital equipment. that is depreciated over 10 or 20 years. Of course, then you have to bring in such equipment in many projects to get part of the claim back. On the other hand, usually those are part of large infrastructure grants from the university or very large clinical grants from NIH, for example, which allow you to buy really, really expensive equipment. The European Commission now slowly moves towards more clinical studies, and they do allow larger expenses. So it's coming there. But they really come from a research background with smaller equipment. Smaller up to 100,000 euro. It's still reasonably big. Yes? Yeah, please.
Just to clarify, Frank, the subcontracting costs, these would have had to be laid out in your proposal. You can't go into subcontracting.
Yes and no. For the larger subcontracts, the rule of thumb is something like 5% or 10% of the total budget. If that is subcontracting, then it becomes substantial, and you really need to justify upfront. Either you say, I have a subcontractor who is fit to do the job, can do the job, this is the quote that we receive, and we would like to use this contractor for this task. If you put that in the proposal, and the evaluators will not say that is not correct. Thank you. If the evaluators do not make any comment about it, then the European Commission can only accept it. So that's fine. The alternative, if you don't know the subcontractor yet, you can say, okay, this amount of money is reserved in the budget for a subcontractor, and we will find the subcontractor according to our own institutional rules. That means for small sums, you can just find the subcontractor and that's it. For example, pay for a website, 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 euro is never a problem. Don't even need to ask justification for that. For the larger sums, usually they go through an internal tendering process with 2 or 3 offers and you pick the best one. But that is your accounting rule. You don't need permission from the European Commission. On the other hand, it's good practice if there is a significant change in your budget. For example, you need much more subcontracting than foreseen. First ask permission from the project officer before you make the purchase. But flexibility in budget in FP7 projects is allowed, and you can change up to 10% in your budget without justification. And if it's a more substantial change between personnel, equipment, time, flights, whatever, ask permission first, but you're allowed to do this. If you are the research leader and you make the decision in your own context, as long as you explain to the project officer why you make a change, it's allowed. The ACP is much more strict in this. Really.
I just want to ask a scenario. What if you have, let's say, 2 proposals that you're submitted to the EU for funding? Maybe these 2 projects need the same equipment. Can you claim twice on the same equipment?
Yes.
Where you buy up one equipment and can both projects use the same?
Yes, the only thing you need to be careful with is that you do not double fund the same activity. So if one person uses one experiment and you claim his time plus the equipment on that one project, and you claim the same time, the same equipment on the other project, that's not allowed. An auditor will look for those overlapping things. But if you have a person working half-time on one project and half-time on another project, and the same with the equipment, it's half-time used for one project and another half-time on another project, perfectly fine, no problem. As long as you record. You need to not convince the European Commission, you need to convince your auditor. It's an internal issue. Yes?
Just to comment, some of us in here are fully public-owned organizations. And although we're getting funding from the government, say, I don't think we can just go and purchase the equipment. We have to go through an internal procurement process, which is consistent with the government of the
Of course. Yes.
So that makes the process even longer. So you might think that, oh, but this money is not coming from government. It is coming from donor. You still have to go through.
So I said with you follow your own accounting rules. That applies to procurement as well. You follow your internal rules for it.
What I was saying is that even though it's a pain and it takes longer, sometimes it's for the best. Because when the auditor comes in, then you know you don't have anything to worry about.
Yes.
Everything was done fair from the get-go. So you don't have to worry 3 years after when you forget everything you've done and dusted. You know, when someone brings something on you, you're still all right.
Now there's
So it's best.
one suggestion I can give. I wanted to tell that later in one of the slides, but it's an appropriate thing now. Many universities have central accounting systems where everything is mixed in certain accounts. So for final reporting, it can be a pain to ease out purchases on a project out of the general system. If you don't have a good coding system linked to a particular project, it can be difficult. So in those instances, I suggest you just keep copies of all the purchases on the project, and you put them together in a folder in your own lab, so that when the reporting time comes, you know exactly which purchases you have done on this particular project, and you link them into the existing accounting system. The auditor can just look at your folder only. If they have questions about purchases, you just double check whether it's actually entered into the central system or not. That makes the auditing process so much quicker. And you still have a quick record, because if you have for every single purchase a question, you have to go to the central system. It takes forever. So just keep a copy. And actually what they did in my research lab was to have a student keep track of the copies. And as they do, they have an idea about depreciation, about equipment, about how to build a budget. So it's a learning experience for them too. Yeah. So that's a general remark, but this is exactly what the auditor will look for. Have you been a good housekeeper? So not ineligible costs like paying your politician or going to the casino on a fantastic spree. Unfortunately, proposal preparation costs are not eligible either, because you prepare the proposal before the competition. It's not a project yet, unfortunately, and that is a real cost in time and in travel sometimes, or in time to help external advice and professional advice. But we prepared that this is an investment where you have no absolute guarantee that you get the project refunded. So what I usually do is have slightly overlapping projects, so that you have some money in the bank account from one project to prepare already the second one. And I use meetings on an existing project while I'm meeting people there. My travel costs are paid by the previous project, and as I'm meeting there, then I talk about new projects, like we do here, hopefully as well. And that is a way to prepare and keep the costs really low. But still, your time to write the proposal is your investment in the project. Ineligible is also estimated cost. Of course, you make a budget, and we'll go through the exercise in a minute, with estimations of actual cost. But you cannot enter an estimation in your accounting system. So in the accounting system, you have real cost, no estimations. Unfortunately, VAT is not eligible. It's public taxes, so this is doubly funding public money, so recirculating money is not allowed. So you have to take out of all your procurement the VAT. And businesses have the possibility to reclaim the VAT. I can reclaim my VAT if I pay. But universities may or may not be able to reclaim their VAT. And I'll come back to the VAT in a minute, how you can cover those costs. Yes?
Sorry, back to the ineligible costs.
Yes.
What we find sometimes is that the project sometimes is so complicated and big that we actually get assistance from donor agencies to prepare the project proposal.
Yeah.
So what I ask is for a concept. When they look at a concept, depending on the size of the project, they will sometimes provide funding or
That depends on the funding. With the European Commission, that's not done. You have a complete detailed budget you bring in, and you get your grant on the basis of that budget, no estimation. However, once you get going through the project, you can make changes. You can shift cost items from one line to another with justification. So that is the flexibility allowed here. But the European Commission does not work with an estimation, and if your costs return to be higher, well, that's your problem. So it depends on the fund. Yes?
Can you factor in contingency in your budget?
Yes, that is possible. But don't call it a contingency, except for some formulas they allow 10% or 15% contingency as a budget line. The European Commission doesn't use that budget line, but call it something else.
No.
For example, if you don't know about travel, but you estimate, well, whoa, this could be 20% extra, you enter a higher number in your budget, even if you hope that your travel budget will be lower. If you actually use less of the travel budget, you can use that for contingency and other items. So that is the flexibility I was explaining. But ACP, for example, has a 50% contingency.
Is it 50%? 5%. I think it's 5%.
In this particular project, I think it was 50.
The last one I think I was heard was 5%.
Was that EduLink? Maybe EduLink is low.
No, it was a sustainable development.
But this one is paid from the Science and Technology Program. Maybe that is a different rule. That could be. Yeah?
I have a question about taxes. I think most of the organizations represented here are exempt from what we call GCT, which is VAT. But I've recently encountered a problem with another donor agency where after over 3 years of a project, all of a sudden they decided to ask us, what is all of this education tax and, taxes that come out of salaries, which are, some of them are part paid by the employee and co-funded by the organization, and these were charged back to the donor agencies. Does EU allow those kinds of taxes? Statutory deductions from salary?
That's a complicated one. I can share you one thing for sure, and that is if it's entered into the accounting system as a personnel cost for the institute, it's eligible cost.
Okay.
Because
it is.
the personnel costs are the actual salary that is paid to the employee, plus any taxes, plus any extra legal expenses, plus pensions, plus social security, plus
Health
things like
insurance.
this. If it's all under the ledger of HR cost, then it's eligible cost. If it's paid and on an invoice, it says tax, government tax, then it's ineligible.
The problem that the other fund there is having is even though they've seen, on a quarterly basis we're doing our reporting, including all of our salary costs and breaking all the income tax and statutory deductions and so on, they look back at the contracts. And of course they're implied because everyone has to pay them, but they were not physically written into the contract. So that's where they were like, we don't know if these are eligible. And they use this whole thing about VAT not being allowed, but we're saying it's a completely different thing. You have to pay these.
Why not allow the employees to file their own taxes?
Unfortunately, we're not able to do that because we currently do our payroll through the university.
But on the other hand, your auditor is probably familiar with the system.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So the only person you have to convince is your auditor.
Oh no, we have to convince
so there's no concern to convince the European Commission. They don't even want to see those details. It's your auditor who will certify that the costs are eligible or not.
You see, the fear is always that we spend the money correctly and properly, but years after, they say, oh, this was an ineligible cost after all, and you need to find that money and give it back to us. So, we have to be very careful.
So, maybe I'm naive, but if an auditor actually signs a financial statement with his stamp and signature, it should be final, legally binding. So they cannot go back to criticize and change the rules. You might have a legal case if you do. Anyway, As I said, exchange losses are not eligible either, unfortunately. So please be careful with those.
I want to ask about that. This project in particular, why can't we operate in a hard currency accounting system without the demand for it to be done in local currency, which then has to be back converted into the donor's currency with all the risk of loss and gain?
The European Commission would welcome that, but it's your battle with your government or your institute to allow it.
No, I think we got a directive from the project coordinator that accounts must be kept in J dollars, but allocations are made in euros. I don't see any need for a double currency accounting system.
Yeah, there is no need for it. So the financial guidelines are very clear. I gave a copy of the financial guidelines here in the package, so you can actually go back to the actual text of the guidelines. Very clear. If you're completely free to organize your own accounting system, nobody can tell you how you do your accounting. Absolutely. So,
I'm sorry, I mean, in working with CEDO and some other funders who do require receipts and so on, I can understand why they do require the double accounts, the double.
But at the moment,
because they're actually looking back at the receipts to match.
I know where this comes
from.
from.
You know, we spend in Jamaican dollars, so.
Well,
I know where this comes
on
from.
the day you make the transaction, you convert to Canadian immediately through your accounting process, which says 10,000 Jamaican dollars is equivalent to X Canadian for that expenditure.
Yeah.
So the account is really kept in Canadian dollars.
Now, look, Martin, you know where it comes from. It's now the coordinator of this project is auditing your accounts. So they want to have everything in the local currency because the auditor wants to do that. There's nothing to do with the European Commission.
It's like complicated.
Absolutely. Since I have a company, I said right from the start, we follow our own accounting rule, our own auditor. So I have never sent the details to the auditor. Only the auditing.
You'll tell us that a year or two.
I did. Unfortunately, Peter doesn't listen. Here. In the A forms of the proposal, you will see a budget, and this is just a demonstration so that you can see, if you see the A form from your coordinator in Europe, how does it look like, and where should you look for your cost? Very important is what kind of accounting system you're using for the indirect costs, and I will explain in a couple of slides what that means. But for most of you, it will be the so-called simplified method with 60% indirect costs. 60. So I will explain in a few moments.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, 60% indirect costs. I'll come back to this in a moment. On this budget, you will find what kind of funding scheme is paying for this particular project. If this is a collaborative project, it will be co-funding with a certain percentage of funding, 50, 75, or 100%. If this is a specific support action, as I explained yesterday, these are different ones. Like the mobility grants also, they pay for 100%. But that determines how many percent of funding you get. And then you have cost categories in direct costs, in indirect costs, and you add them together as the total eligible cost. That is everything that is in the proposal as a minimum. Now in the part B, you can put in a budget with much more detail, and I will give you an example how to do that. But this is the minimum of the European Commission says. How do you build up a budget? Quite often it's a bit like this. You have this big thumb, and you make a very, very rough estimation of the actual cost. So let's go briefly to this Excel table, and I'll show you how to use this as a tool to estimate your cost in a much more professional way than this one. This Excel table is not restricted or fixed or protected in any way. It's just an example from an actual project in which I was involved. And I share that with you without the names, of course. These are the partners, 10 partners, so remove the names, but the actual costs are there. And you can play with it. You can modify the formula, you can add sheets, you can change columns, you can copy formula, change them, whatever you like. It's a real working tool. Now, how does it work? This is the summary sheet, where you have the overview of the cost of each of the partners and the category of the cost. You see that, as I said, costs are divided over content-related cost and management-related cost. So you divide the budgets in two. The ballpark figure, rule of thumb, is that your management cost should not exceed maybe in extreme cases 15% of the total budget. For less complex projects and projects that are more related to networking, it may have a restriction of 7% of the total budget. So be reasonable in your management cost, unless you have a very good reason to do this, and then you justify why. So there's not a fixed limit, but almost a moral limit. Roughly 10% of the budget for many. First of all, you start with developing a budget based on personnel costs. You estimate the number of work packages and the amount of work you need in person months, and that drives a good part of your budget. And I will show you there in this particular sheet, sorry for the typo, this worksheet, you can actually calculate personnel cost in detail. On the summary sheet, everything is summarized in one figure. And the same with travel subsystems, we have a separate worksheet to calculate the difference in detail, and the final number is copied automatically into the summary sheet. So whatever you change in these worksheets is copied and linked directly into the summary sheet. And you see the result. And that way you can change small numbers and details here and tweak the balance of the budget between the partners. You can save on how far can I go without being out of balance with other partners who have a similar workload. Of course, you use your own personnel cost. That's obvious. Let's have a look at the personnel cost. I worked out this in great detail. So for every single partner, for every single work package, I split out every single task. And for simple projects, you just eliminate all the details and you fill in only one line. But for this project, we really did the full exercise. Every single task in a work package got an estimation of person months for each partner. Now, how do you convert these person months into salaries? I have a separate sheet here, which is called assumptions.